I talked with another person in the class about the recordings too, and I think I'm just gonna, for our own privacy, give a week for people to watch them, and if they don't watch them in that week, I'll just let the link expire. That way we can feel a little safer, just talking about whatever we want to talk about and not worry about somebody from our district joining, or I don't know. It just feels like,
Yep. I
you
thought
know,
about it after.
yeah. So I
Yeah.
think we'll just, each week I'll sort of remove the link for the week prior, and people can still email me if they ran out of time. If you couldn't get to the recording or something, I can always share the link, but it's on private Zoom anyway. It's a private link. So anyway, I did want to just go back to lesson one. Something I think we left out that I was curious about were just the tools and activities in general. And, when I explain them, at the beginning of the lesson of the module, is that enough explanation for you to figure out how to use them? Was that enough? I just kind of went over each one. You know what I'm saying? That little video I made where I did a picture of the tool or the activity. So tools are for the adults, the activities are for the kids or the mentors or whatever. And then the activities are more for the students. And did that seem like nobody really had questions about them? So am I to assume that you understood how to use them? All right.
Yeah, I thought so. I felt like I loved the examples that you had. I like how you had the blank one and then with one completed, that was helpful. And then you talking through them, I felt like that was plenty.
Okay, great. I tried to keep it really simple and hope that was enough. So the same thing for Marie, you're the one who taught me this. Let me see if I can find it. Remember when we talked about that book that you were sharing with your first graders? You know
Was
that book
it?
that you read about the pebble?
Oh yeah, Sylvester and the Magic Pebble.
Yeah, can you talk to them about it real quick? I'm gonna see if I can find it.
Oh, I wonder if I have a copy easy to grab. Are you guys familiar with that one?
I'm not.
Okay. So it's and you can jump in and help me if I remember the story incorrectly. Just,
Yeah,
but
because
it's the story of a donkey. I think his name is Sylvester. He goes out and he finds this rock that's able to grant wishes. So whatever he wishes comes true. And then a lion comes and he can't think. Like he goes into fight or flight and the his best idea is I wish I were a rock. And so he gets turned into a rock and then he gets kind of stuck there. Um, because the magic only works if you're holding the pebble. And it's just a really fun story to use to talk about this autonomic nervous system states because it's easy for kids to make connections of where he is on his ladder when stuff is happening, and then his parents are in distress because he never comes home, and then he's gone for a really long time, and he almost gives up hope, and then his parents end up they almost give up hope, and then they end up to lift their spirits. They end up going for a picnic, and they where do they end up? They end up on at Sylvester's rock, the rock that is Sylvester. And then the mother ends up picking up the rock, or the father, I can't remember who, and they're saying how much Sylvester would love the rock, and then they make a wish, and he comes back to his donkey form, and everybody's so happy, and it's just it lends itself just really well to talking about nervous system states.
yeah, it was a great book. I bought it. I don't know where it went. I went looking for it. I'll have to find it. And um
I think
the
I can grab it. I'll step away. I think it's on my bookshelf.
okay. And when my thoughts was like in step one, when we're talking about observing ANS states, this one where we're having them, if you read a book, you have them start talking about when did Sylvester feel safe and connected? Like at the beginning, they're going on a picnic, they're going out to play, and they have all this connection with his family. And then what happened in the story where he becomes fight and flight and sympathetic. And it's really clear when it happens in the story. It's just a perfect story. And then he's shut down under a rock. I mean, he's like a rock, or he becomes this rock where he's immobile and he has no energy, and he's shut down and he's sad, and his family's sad. And so it's a perfect story to explain those states. And yeah, Marie shared that with me and I went and bought it. And it's an old book. That's Sylvester and the Magic's.
Pebble. Leah,
Yeah.
do you remember the writer's name? I can't even remember. Is
Yeah,
it?
it's William
Oh,
Steig.
Oh,
yeah.
there you go. Do you
Yeah.
know that book, Leah?
Yeah, from
Okay.
when I was a kid.
Yeah, it's been around
Yeah, it's
forever.
like from the 70s, maybe.
Yeah. But I think teaching through literature is such a good way because sometimes we don't really understand our own states very well, but we can see it in others a little easier. And I think it's less threatening too to talk about a character in a book. So I put that in chapter 1 because I thought that was a pretty good way to teach befriending was through the stories. So there's a lot in step 2, isn't there? I mean, there's
Yes.
a lot
And
going
just to
on.
build on your you're tying things to literature. One of the things I think it was in this second module talking about helping kids to grow a vocabulary about feelings that is very concrete for them, like how to read their body and connect that to a word. And I think that the literature is a good way to do that if it's quality literature.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too.
Deb, the other one that I use sometimes is Where the Wild Things Are. Because
Oh,
as an
yeah.
OT, that's like a really good one to act out. And then when Max tames them by staring them in the eyes, like I just always think that's really a funny one. But that's one I like because you can sail and you can climb. Like there's a lot of movement stuff in
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, interesting.
And let's see, I have a couple here too. Um, I found this one. I love
I
this.
just thought of one other thing that kind
Yeah.
of ties into something you taught me too, Deb, is that the other thing is there's one part in that book where Max says, be still, and you freeze.
Mm,
And that was something I learned from you, Deb, because then you're using your break, right?
yeah. Yeah. That's cool. I was in a bookstore, just a gift store in downtown Tucson, and I got this one, I Am Love, a book of compassion.
Yeah.
And it's a really, have you ever seen that one, Susan Verd? But when I see someone going through a storm of hurt and unfairness, of anger and sadness, like to me, that is so sympathetic right there, that
Yeah.
sympathetic storm. Like all through this book, I could just see, you know, and then they come back into co-regulation and back together. It's just a really beautiful, this is a really
What's the name
beautiful
of that
book.
one? I am
I Am Love, a Book of Compassion by Susan Verde.
Verde.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful book. And
She's
then,
got a whole series too.
yeah,
Say
she
that again,
does.
please.
Oh,
Well,
she has a whole series of books.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
mhm.
she's great.
It's only like $8.99, this board book. It's really reasonable. And then I also like this. I'm on publishers list because I've gotten published, and so they send me free books, hoping I will share them with people, I think. So this was one that was sent to me. They have a series of people. This is I Am Temple Grandin.
Uh,
And this one's really interesting too, because she talks about hiding under her couch cushion and how that helped her to get regulated. And it's a cartoon kind of book.
Yeah, we have that series in our library, so I'll look for that title.
Yeah, I thought this one could work really well. Yeah, this I'm proud to be different. So they do a lot of different, highlight a lot of different people who are kind of famous these days. And but you can really, this would be a great one for 2 because she's talking about all her like her ventral anchors, all her keeping one foot in ventral. What are the things
Mm.
that help her stay one foot in ventral? And um I just love this where she's curled up under the couch. Ah, I can relate to that actually. So
I love that.
yeah.
I didn't know that was put in kids' book form. Do you
Yeah.
know, last year I was working with a student who was reading Pride and Prejudice. So, as a high school student, and we were looking up resources, and one of the resources um, said that, oh my gosh, I must blank on his name. Who's the man? Darcy was on the spectrum.
Oh,
No.
And the connection for the student was amazing. Like, amazing that he could see how he was missing the nonverbal cues. He was not getting this woman who he really liked. Like, it was so good.
interesting.
Isn't that
I think
fun?
literature is like the best way for the high school kids to learn all this because it's so rich. When I read books now, I'm always looking at the characters and what state they're in and where they're regulating resources. Like I just naturally do it now when I'm reading. It's just interesting. So I do color consultations on Saturdays where I find people's personal color palettes. It's just a fun thing I do on the side. And I had 2 Saturdays ago, she's a therapist here in town. And I was talking about it, and this is so interesting. She said all the kids want to be autistic. The high
Mhm.
school kids, they all want to be autistic. Like it's like the cool thing to be neurodivergent. So they come in and they say to her, I think I'm autistic, but I haven't, they want to be in a teen or adult diagnosed autistic person. Who would ever have thought that being autistic would be the in thing? I mean,
Not me. I wouldn't
yeah.
have got that.
And she said most of them though are depressed. It's depression. And it has to do with social media and the whole, yeah, yeah. So anyway, okay, so what are we thinking? I wanted to kind of go through these tools a little bit. So the staff and student safety planning tool, that was that one where I go inside, outside, between, okay? And monitoring our sense of safety. So I thought this would be interesting to do as a staff. Like, how safe do we feel? I don't know if it's realistic, but I think, like, how safe do you feel during the day? If you have to go to the bathroom, I remember when I was teaching, I was itinerant reading and I went in and out of classrooms. Do you know the teachers loved me? They didn't love me for reading. They loved me because I gave them bathroom breaks on rainy days. That's why they loved me. I would go around to everybody because I don't have a break on a rainy day. So I'd go around, go to the bathroom, go to the bathroom, go to the next one, go to the bathroom. I'd bring in my twister puzzle cards. I'd bring in some fun stuff and I'd say, go to the bathroom, take 10 minutes, whatever you need. It's like they just didn't get a break. And so I think when we look at some of that, I don't know, it just feels like, outside, what spaces, tools, or things in the environment increase signals of safety. I felt like it sort of had to start with us, and then we could do the environmental safety walk, through the campus or with a student. And like I said when I did my little video, is this on page 53, I don't know if you have the book or not, but that Shalia was real. That was exactly what happened to her in the first week of her being at school. It was a disaster at the high school. She went from a small, Marie, she went to Old Shasta, how small that school is,
Right,
right?
that's very small.
Where everybody knows her name, to Shasta High.
Wow.
Yeah. So she went, from 8th grade to 9th grade, and she was just overwhelmed by it. Shasta High had so many students, like 3,000, 4,000.
I'm not sure the number, but it's giant. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe not
And
quite.
Old Shasta has less than a couple hundred, I would imagine, maybe like 150 or something.
Yeah,
Like
it's a really tiny little school. It's probably even smaller now. All the houses burnt down around it. The fire. It's probably even smaller than when we went there. But yeah, so I felt like this was really easy for me to give us an example. And I feel how important that would have been had I walked through the school and kind of looked at it in terms of danger for her, how much stress I could have reduced in her. She wouldn't, they called me and said she won't get on the bus. At the end of the day, it's like she was frozen, man. She was, yeah. So I had to go in, and it's when before her language went offline, and she just rattled it off. No seatbelt, no this, no this, no that. I mean, she just rattled it off, like all these things. She was just in a panic over. And so I don't know, just feels like that's something we need to be aware of. Leah.
Um, recently at, the school I was telling you about that I've been going down in Chula Vista, a lot of the kids have to go upstairs to the resource room and the learning center, and that is a place where kids are falling apart. And they keep asking me to come and observe what's going on with the kids going down the stairs. And they're like clinging to the walls and going down on their bottoms. Like, it's really interesting how, and I was really thinking about that stairwell is a very scary part of their day. And it's where all the resource, all the special ed are up, not OT, we're downstairs, but the learning center's up there. And so I was just thinking about that with the environmental safety walk. I'm like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, you almost wonder, couldn't they swap some classrooms out and move it downstairs? Like, to me, that's a big issue.
Yeah.
That they need to move it downstairs. What, is there a reason it has to be upstairs?
It's, it's a charter school, and nobody's really quite sure what the building used to be. But downstairs, it's tough. They do have interventions downstairs, but it's more like this wide open space. Mm-hmm. And upstairs, they've got nooks. So there's safety up, like it's cozy up there. I get why they're going up there, but I am wondering if there's some, it just really had me thinking about how we get.
I wonder how you can help. So that'd be something, I think I would open that up even to, like, I would open it up to the students and say, what are your concerns when you're going up and down, and just have a little open conversation with that, and then how can we figure this out? How can we make that feel safer? Like, even the walls, if there was a little padding on the walls going up, or grips on the, I don't know, there's got to be ways, right?
Yeah.
But I'm sure there's some kids who just can't even do the opposite leg up and down, just the movement of going up and down the stairs.
Yeah. I know.
Buddy them with a buddy holding hand, there's, I don't know.
Yeah,
it's tricky.
That's what I'm thinking. It really made me think, oh my gosh, of course, it's not just about low muscle tone and planning, and there's so much more.
Or like having an adult at the base, adult at the top, having a student be able to request a mentor to help them without being embarrassed. Because what grades are these?
It goes K through 8.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Is there something scary about the stairs themselves? Like, is it like a regular indoor staircase where the riser part is closed? Or is it open?
It's just, during transition periods, it's crowded.
Oh, yeah.
I think they have made some changes where a lot of classes were switching rooms, and they've stopped doing that, I think, just to avoid some of that. So they are, especially the special ed team at the school, they're very proactive. They're they're paying attention, and they're
so I think there'd be like a limited number of students in the hallway at one time. So you'd have color coded, or team one go, now team two go, now team three go, or what, so that there's only a certain amount of students, and those kinds of things. I think
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, completely. Well,
yeah.
it's interesting because I kind of felt like, duh, like, because I was just like looking at motor planning and, tone, and then I'm like, and safety. Oh my God.
It's interesting when you look through the lens of safety, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's really a different view.
But that was one of my ahas that I didn't write. 'Cause
Yeah, that's great.
500 ahas.
Yeah.
I kind of see this tool as something that maybe more people would feel comfortable using and discussing when it comes to thinking about a student. And then I'm not so sure how many adults would feel comfortable thinking about it like in terms of ourselves, except for in private. Um, I don't know. I think that and then some of the things that make me feel unhappy here at work and feel not super safe, there's nothing I can do anything about it. Like the big ugly security fence, or the fact that I have reflective cover on the window that blocks natural light into my room, and I can't have plants in here anymore. And
I noticed that I was looking at your room, and I know it's because the beginning of the year, but you usually have plants everywhere and you have little, you have water tanks on the,
yeah, but I still do all that, and I have grow lights for those plants, when we have them, but I can't have like a house plant and have it be happy in here.
yeah.
So,
You
but
know what you could do is Lucky Bamboo.
oh yeah.
I think Lucky Bamboo doesn't like a lot of sun. And
Oh,
like my Lucky Bamboo does really well, and they grow like weeds.
oh,
And they're really easy to propagate. You can cut them and put them, and they grow in my bathroom, which
oh,
doesn't have a lot of light. They
interesting.
need a little bit of light, but they tend to like it a little quiet, a little less light. Might try it.
Yeah, okay. I'll think about that.
Jess.
Well, I was just gonna say, I mean, Marie, you kind of were doing it. You were giving your examples, right? I think if we're a little bit more vulnerable ourselves and explain the safety walk for us, then I think other people will be more encouraged to do so. I all the time when I talk about like sensory processing in meetings, I explain that we are all sensory beings with certain things that we love and certain things that are just so harmful to us. And I talk about going to Walmart. I can't. Visually, auditorily, it is too much stimuli, and I can't handle it. And so I explain that to my families, and they're kind of going, oh, okay. So this person that's a professional, they're saying when they're unsafe and they're correlating it to whatever. And so they're like, okay, I can get it now, and I can be vulnerable too. So
Yeah,
I
that
think
makes
kind of
sense.
what you did already.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, for us it's Costco. We have one that's was super busy in Marana. It's packed night and day. It's packed, and we only went there for two things. We got halibut and we got wipes, my bathroom wipes. Those are the only two things. And one day we made the halibut and we ate it, and we didn't really even like the fish that much. And we kind of looked at each other and said, "Can we just be done with fish and Costco?" And he's like, "Yeah." And it was like felt such a relief. Like we texted at the night to each other, like he was getting changed. And I said, I feel so relieved to think I don't ever have to go to Costco again. Like he's like, I'm so relieved I don't have to eat halibut again. We were just, but I mean, that's kind of silly, but it's sort of in the same vein, right? It's like, so what I kind of had designed this is after you did the safety walk, then you you take those signals of danger and you add some cues of safety. So you say, well, what can we do? And So I think this would be like a tier 3. I mean, you're not going to do this with every student in your classroom, of course not. But if you've got some student that just always seems to be melting down and really struggling, I think if somebody could do that, on your staff and really talk with the student, I think you might find there are some. I guess I've been on webinars, people always ask me about all these kids who melt down and things like that. And I say, well, I'm not a behavior specialist for one, I'm a reading specialist. However, I know that's the part of what we do as teachers, have to deal with behavior. I said, once I understood polyvagal, I want to start with that the child is feeling cues of danger. I'm going to start there. It may not be that. It may be a child that's never had any boundaries at home and doesn't have boundaries and is just, needs to be taught some of that. But I'm going to start with the nervous system. I'm going to start there and see, detective, be curious. Leah. Leah, did you?
Oh yeah, sorry, my computer just did something
Just-
too. I was like, where did it go? So I it's interesting because when I was thinking about my own cue of danger, it's like assessment after assessment after assessment I'm like, no more, please. Which is really interesting because that's really what I don't like about my job. Is the lack of being able to predict what my workload will be. That's very stressful for me. And and then as I was thinking about that, then I was really thinking about our students. And there's one student that I have in particular who has no class, like his fine motor skills are fine, his handwriting's fine, but he won't do any work and he meltdowns the entire day. And I think it's at the point where, and so I was also thinking about the conversation with our expectations too low, but this is a kid who will tear apart the entire classroom. And so in a way, he has become that kid that they're just like thankful that he's in the room. So when I saw him on Monday, and you could see he was sort of building to get attention. Like he was in his quiet corner, but there was no one available to be with him. And so I went over and actually did like dots and squeezies and just kind of, just did some little things like his names sort of like my name. So we, just little connection points and things like that. But I really was thinking, here is this kid who is exactly that. Like the expectation is, please stay in here and don't tear up the classroom. And the minute he gets asked to do something, it's too much. And the teacher's got the whole agenda for the day ahead, like all those tools. And Jessa actually wondered if in your work with the executive function, if maybe there was something that lended to this, because do you know that kind of combination of cues of safety and then our students who literally just melt down the minute they're asked to do something that is directed by someone else. I kind of like, it's behavioral, but it's also like, I want to have a tantrum. I just got 5 new assessments. I'm like, no, like, I don't even like doing them. You know what I mean? I'm like, they're all the same. I'm just like, can I just tell you, they all have weak executive function skills and no one knows how to read.
What nervous system state do you think this boy is in? If you had to watch him, when he's not in sympathetic, tearing up the classroom, what nervous system state is he in?
Dorsal. I mean, I think he,
So he's either shut down. So here's really interesting. I keep saying you're going to watch this video in lesson 4. I can't wait for you guys to watch it because I was like, ah. But I've had time for it to land, and I've watched it now 3 or 4 times because there was so much there, and I was triggered by so much of it and really defensive and teacher angle. But here's one thing Dr. Sherrill said, and these are the kids he works with nonstop 24/7, who you're describing, that's who he works with, right? So the guy knows a little something, and he's on the spectrum himself. He said, fight is coming out of freeze. Fight can be coming out of dorsal. Remember that ladder. You have to move through sympathetic to get to ventral. And we shut the fight down as soon as it starts to happen. And he says, fight for many of these kids is coming out of dorsal and freeze and moving toward health. I never thought of it that way. I never looked at it that way. I immediately look at it as disrespecting me, da 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 da. And I'm like, okay. So I think sometimes if we look at it, is this child doesn't know how to get to ventral? So he shuts down, that doesn't work. So then he tears up the room, that doesn't work because then he gets in trouble. Is he trying to get to regulation? But the way we're looking at it isn't a nervous system lens. Jess.
I was also thinking, a lot of the kiddos that I've seen lately that this is kind of their MO too is, I mean, they're used to being in that fight. They are, I'm going to say it, even though we've had videos that kind of poo-pooed this idea, a lot of these kids have had different types of trauma. So it's changed with the other videos. I get it. They say certain things, but it changes your physical and mental makeup. Okay, so these kids are in this fight mode. They're hyper vigilant. And so they're used to it. But I also think after a while, it feels good to be in that state. And so it feels comfortable. It feels maybe a little powerful and a little bit like they have control, even though they don't have control. And so I have seen that more often too, and kind of wonder if that also might be the case with some of these kiddos that they might not actually want to try to get to ventral. They might be enjoying where they're at because it feels comfortable and safe.
It's their
I don't
home
know.
away from home. Deb Dana calls it their home away from
Yep.
home, right? I call it their go-to place within. That's where they feel safe. They feel safe. That's a great point. They feel safe and sympathetic. And what did you mean by the videos? You mean videos in our classroom?
Yeah, it was last week. It was Leah, do you remember which one it was?
yeah,
But he was
it's
basically like,
Dr. Benobas. Did I say his name right?
yeah, and
Oh yeah, he's very controversial.
yeah, I had a rough time with that video.
Dr. Bonanno, yeah, he is controversial.
Yeah. I liked his discussion on the flexibility. I like that. But I also didn't. I mean, I think maybe both can be true. That's what I would say. That.
Well,
It's
and
not-
even the one that I wrote, that I did around, are we seeing our students as less resilient? Right? That's the whole discussion. And I think it is an individual, and I think both can be true. And I think that that's where I question all of this. This is where I get kind of stuck, is how much do we create a perfect classroom environment that, meets every need? And then the reality in the world is this, and how much do we push them, that scaffolding, Vygotsky's, scaffolding, where you push them a little bit out of their comfort zone, a little bit out of their window of tolerance. It's tricky. And you can see there's so many different opinions about it. And, that's as polarized as we are politically, we are in schools as well right now. We've got this whole side saying, quit with the compassion, quit with the, you know, wrapping them in bubble wrap and tough stuff, and they can do it. And there's that going on too. When I watch the teachers quitting videos, Leah.
I do wonder though, because I just think of through the years that I've been working in schools, where I feel like we had more bandwidth for the kindergartners who showed up not knowing their ABCs. There was a little more room for everyone to be in a classroom, and it wasn't like now it's like you got to be writing sentences at most schools. And I like the school where I am now, where I'm in a couple of different schools, but that's one school that it's new to me. A lot of these kids are non-native English. They're not native English speakers. They have families who don't necessarily read in English or read at all. And they're still, they're held to the same standards that the kids in Del Mar, which is a very affluent, educated community, so they're just like failing from the get-go. And then I think of that, like, where is the sense of hopefulness, or I can do this, or like, I really love that idea that flexibility begins with the idea that there's like hope and options and something you can do. That is one thing I like that Dr.
Banana. It's like banana with an O.
Banana said. And I think that speaks to a lot of the lens that when we look at our students who are, kind of like, oh, you're never gonna, like, who cares if you graduate from high school kind of thing. Because, yeah, I work with all of them, right? Like, those ones who have everything and parents who've read to them every day of their life since they were born, and those who just really, that's just not a part of the world at all.
Yeah, imagine walking into school and already you're a failure. Already you feel like I'm way beyond. Maria, you could probably speak to that too as our teacher in the group. How do you handle that with your first graders coming in when I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I'm just.
No, that's fine. No,
Here's your
actually,
thoughts.
actually, I'm aware of that possible reaction inside of people, and I just do a lot of talking about wherever we are, that's where we are, and we're all learning. And just because, and it like, does this mean you're smarter than other people if you can do X, Y, or Z? And no, it doesn't. It just means you've had more practice at it, or you really like it, and then that makes you practice it even more, and but I think you're absolutely right that I got a little boy at the very end of the school year. I think he came for the last 6 weeks of school, and when I sat to listen to him read, he kept turning to me, and he's like, I forgot, like I just don't know. And I felt for him. I was like, it's okay, buddy, just whatever you got, I'm great, it's good, bring it, I'm here for you. And so he was aware that he was lower than other people in the room, and we ended up making a really good connection. I have his little brother next year, so I'll get to see him some more. But I think just having that dialogue with kids, just to say, yeah, we are different, and that's okay. And I'm here to help you grow, and you can do this, and it's okay. But you're right, there is a lot of pressure, and I do think that is something I worry about with TK, and it's like we're kids. I wish that the younger kids could play more and just have a more earthy kind of time to be, and instead of, I feel like in some ways, I hope we're not, it depends on what kind of a TK environment they're in, because I think some of it can look really academic and sitting in a chair with desks, and others are more, it seems developmentally appropriate to me, where
Yeah.
it's more around play and exploration and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. It's one thing I did because my daughter also went to Montessori, and it's one thing that I think is just very kind of organic and great in like not all Montessori, but Montessori philosophy is like there's so much like ritual of like, that executive function. We set out our mat, then we bring out our materials, and the materials are considered beautiful and handled with respect. And then you just kind of do what you do with them. Like maybe you're counting to 5, maybe you know all the states in America because you're good at singing songs. But the interesting thing is, like, I really look at, because I think, especially for OTs and speech pathologists and stuff, like we can work with students from kindergarten all the way through, and not everyone who's a strong reader in kindergarten is like my strongest reader at the end of high school. Like it's not always a linear thing. It's just like you said, maybe you had exposure. Maybe you just really connected with like Biscuit, and then you read all the Biscuit books. There's so many factors that like even like with kids on the spectrum who early on, maybe before they're diagnosed, are so hyperverbal, and then they just get seen through this lens, and then they crash out later because they went from being like a genius, to disappointing everyone because they didn't have the writing organization that's required of them in later middle school.
Yeah, I call that the 4th grade wall.
Yeah.
See, I worked with 3rd through 6th grade. Those were my sweet spot kids. I call them, they were muddled messes. Like they were just so muddled in the mess of, like they had everything they were taught up to that, some stuck, some didn't stick. And they just like, I really loved organizing all their muddled mess of knowledge kind of, and getting it cleaned up a little bit and helping them be a little more successful for 4th grade. So when they get the 3rd graders, and there's just so much more content that happens in 4th. So and if they have any neurodevelopmental challenges, or a lot of cues of danger all along the way, that's going to be a big wall for them. Dr. Goda, the vision therapist that I've worked with a lot, he lives in Reading. Marie's heard of him. He most of the kids he starts to see is in 4th grade. They were doing great. And the parents are like, what? He's top of his class in 1st grade, top of his class in 2nd. And then they just start, oh, now he's middle of the class in 3rd. And they just start, when in Steve Terrell's video, he calls it allostatic load. Has any of you heard of that before? Rochelle, have you ever heard of that word before? Allostatic load?
Yes.
I almost want to.
I have.
What
I know.
does that mean? Do you know the definition of it?
I don't, but I have heard it referred to, but no, I don't.
What letter does it begin with?
Allostatic
Static load. Yeah.
load. What is it? Allostatic load refers to the cumulative effects that chronic stress has on mental and physical health.
Right.
More simply, it refers to the wear and tear on the body that life events and environmental stressors create. So there's a sense that kids come into our classroom with a certain amount of allostatic load already there.
Mhm.
And then we add to that allostatic load. And I think chapter 2, step 2 about the safety, I think is a way to reduce allostatic load. Would you think?
Yeah.
I love that because it kind of answers the discrepancy, between the body keeping score and no, it doesn't. It's, resilience or flexible thinking.
Yeah. Jess.
I'm also thinking about this allostatic load with teachers and staff over the past few years, especially with COVID and post-COVID. Because I mean, we were talking about like hope and stuff for the kids, but man, I see a lot of teachers that have like very little to no hope right now. Last year was one of the hardest years that I've had in the school setting, and so many of my teachers were right alongside me, just trying to make it through. And so I wonder about that for our teachers and staff as well. I mean, we're all kind of hitting that right now.
Be an interesting discussion, wouldn't it? Allostatic load. That's an interesting term. I think it's used a lot in the mental health field, but I don't think we use it in education. I think that might be interesting to bring in. Is to start thinking about that. And how do you see like the cues of safety and danger increasing or reducing allostatic load?
For students,
For us and for students.
well, I think one of the biggest things is actually identifying, um, you know, what people see as unsafe. Like, I mean, those kids that are going to that stairwell, I mean, they're kind of going like it's scary, but
Mhm.
like they're not really diving into what exactly is scary. Like we have to pinpoint that before we can, you know, start to learn and find those cues of safety. And so I feel like identifying is like the first step, even for teachers too, or staff. You know, I have teachers who have made several comments about their students who have IEPs for ADHD, or their students have diagnoses of ADHD but are not special education students. And so it's like, hey, I think those diagnoses might be, you know, something you're, you know, identifying as not safe for you in the classroom, you know, so let's figure out how to work through that. But um yeah, I think that identification piece is first and foremost important, because I think we're all just pushing through and not really being present and noticing.
Yeah, Leah.
I just really agree with what you said, Jess, that there's a lot of, one of the comments I made, I forget on which part, is that I do feel like there's a lot of emphasis of just getting kids through, and we do whatever we can to get our kids through. I had 3 students who graduated last year, and I like honestly, I stayed on. They were virtual kids, and I stayed on the computer with them for like hours and hours past their 30 minutes of OT time. And I just, just to be there and just feel like that work buddy. Like, I'm doing my notes, you just keep writing, I'm here if you need me. Sometimes they just need that person present, and that's all it takes. It wasn't like I was really giving them anything but my presence. And I think of how much is being asked of all of us. Like these students are writing essays I wrote in college. And why? Like, why are we demanding this much so that by the time you get through high school, you're just, I think when I got to high school and I got into college, I was on cloud nine. I was so excited. My first days in university, I was like, someone pinch me. This is amazing. Like kids are coming out of high school so burnt out, like just absolutely burnt out with, you think about being in that activated state because they think they're in survival mode, because the only thing available to them is you get the best grades you can, and then they get to college and it's like, oh my gosh, this just never ends. So, where's the dreaming? Where's the like the
The
world's going to be a
joy,
better.
the joy
Yeah,
of
yeah,
learning, the engagement and the joy.
yeah. Like, isn't that really what we all wish for everyone we care for and work with, is that they find their joy and their path and their sense of purpose and balance?
So if we were to do a CLA, which is in your lesson 2, your step 2, and we looked at what is the myth? What is the myth around more, cram more in, get them learning earlier? And yet our national assessment shows nothing's improving, which is intriguing to me. The reading scores aren't improving. They haven't been for years, even though we're something, there's something going on. But that could be a whole rabbit hole we could go down. I think that like it's some of this, I think, in this polyvagal work is about some things are just bigger than what we can handle. And so I think it all comes back to us and where are we in our nervous system states and what are those small things that we can do throughout the day for ourselves to feel safer and more hopeful, and for our students to do as well. One of the things in the video was that the 3 C's where I talk about the choice, context, and connection. And I think keeping that in forefront too. And if we could bring in those 3 forms of cognition for those kids, I think that could lighten cognitive load. So if they do have to write an essay, could it be possible that we do it as a group first? That we distribute it around, and then the group comes up with it. I mean, there's ways, right? There's ways where you can still learn what we're trying to learn, but doing it in a way that we're really looking at cognitive load. I think that's a big, and when I did a high school training, I had them go through this book, and I had them, I think I don't know if I said this once before to you or not, tell me if I did, but I had them, did I tell you that where they had to pick out which lesson they liked the best? Did I mention it? So they had to pick out which lesson, which step they wanted me to focus on. And they all chose, I gotta find it. Well, 4 of the 7 groups chose step 6, reduce cognitive load. I found that really interesting.
Huh.
And I'm going to do that again. I have a training next week on Tuesday and Wednesday. I have school was on Tuesday and Wednesday. I'm doing this book for the first time with the group, 65 OTs. That's going to be interesting. And I'm going to have them pick the step and go around in group. I'm just going to be curious what theirs ends up being, but I bet it's not cognitive load.
But
I don't think that will be the one.
yeah, but I love how you frame that. I love it because yes, we're caught in a cultural education myth right now. We're all just running this marathon, of like the marathon is better. And it's not. It's definitely not. But that's the environment we're all in. And just saying, yeah, this is a myth, and it's based on, I don't even really know what it's, but you know what I mean? It makes it hopeful. It's like, oh yeah, this could change.
I know for me, just watching the kids with the state testing format, I don't do it in my grade, but we have a program that is modeled after the structure of that national test. And I think the test is ridiculously complex. It's not an accurate measure of what kids can do. So I think we're getting these low numbers, but it's not really because the kids are failing as many as they say, that's my point of view.
But I do think that they're struggling with cognitive load.
Yes, I could see that.
I think that's a very, like, they can't go home and play.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, and I do think that like we're missing the part where sometimes people who struggle to read become the most passionate readers. And and people I had a teacher who barely made it through math and was the best math teacher I ever
They're the
had.
best kind.
Makes me think, kind of going back to that question, how do we help kids feel okay if they're not living up to whatever expectation they feel like is for them?
Mhm.
Do you guys remember the series Reading Rainbow? That and we have a big collection of them. I've been teaching so long, I still have a VHS machine in my room. And anyway, but I think kids hearing adults tell stories about their own childhood, like Patricia Polacco is that super famous writer, and she Rashenka's Eggs is a book that we always do, and she shares the story of how she was not good at school and she was not a reader, and then look, she makes her living as a writer, and I think those stories are helpful.
They're really helpful. Really helpful.
Yeah, so maybe there's one of the cues of safety that we like really looking. I mean, I do think cognitive load is maybe bigger than, like, as we're talking about this, I'm like, I think that is a very large element to even our students who are not, who don't have learning challenges, but just it's exhausting. It's exhausting to never get a break.
Well, we have our own cognitive load as well as working in the school system. It's huge cognitive load. It's just huge. There's just so much always going on, always to do. So figuring out, I think it's when we get really stuck in something and I guess that's that whole key of everything is constantly checking in and monitoring our state. And then taking that moment to say, could this be done a little bit differently? Could I reschedule this? Could I not do that assessment 5 in a row? Can we scatter them? No, like my weekend color analysis, I love it, but I only do a couple a month and I spread them out because I'm working all during the week. So sometimes I just need Saturday to just breathe, right? So I think that's a big key is we don't though. We get really busy and we get thrown into it and just taking, polyvagal that micro moments. And I like that concept of micro moments, taking that moment to just go, oh, this isn't feeling very good in my nervous system. So is there something I can, sometimes it's like I go into my closet and I trip over my laundry basket every time. Move the laundry basket. And I moved it one day and went, oh my gosh, that is so much nicer than tripping over it every time I open my door and want to get a top on. But we get busy and we don't notice that it's a small little shift that could make that allostatic load. I like that.
Because we're not present. We're like that whole mindfulness piece. We are just running through our lives.
Yeah.
And so taking that micro moment to just, notice our breathing, notice, our feet on the ground, just little things. I did my capstone when I got my doctorate all about mindfulness for teachers because of burnout. And it's something we take for granted, that idea of being present in the moment, because there's so much we have to do.
We're always out here. We're always out
Mhm.
at the next thing we have to get done. That would be an interesting dissertation. What'd you find? What was your outcomes of that?
Well, so my whole idea was to do a whole school mindfulness program for staff and kids, everyone. And this was right around COVID era. And my deputy superintendent, this is going to get done after the recording, right?
Right.
She
Yeah.
basically said, she was like, no, the kids are getting mindfulness through counselors, our school counselors, and then staff have the options of doing mindfulness stuff through our wellness program. And so I went, okay, well, you won't let me do it. So I'm going to prove to you that we need it. And so I created different, this is how I work. And so I created, different questionnaires, connecting their mental and physical health, seeing what they would want if they wanted a mindfulness program, when they would want it, what they would want included. And I mean, I think it was 85% said they wanted a mindfulness program.
Wow.
Yeah. So I haven't done a whole program yet for everyone, but I do a few yoga Zooms a year. And so it's for all the school. So teachers plug me in, the kids do it, the teachers do it, the staff does it. So, I mean, start off small.
How do you see befriending the nervous system integrating with mindfulness?
I think it's a huge piece. I I haven't been doing as much mindfulness as I used to. Like, it actually helped me get through my doctorate program in the middle of COVID and everything else. Like, and now I'm just too busy. But this idea of, knowing what state you're in, understanding, like just taking that micro moment, and just checking in with yourself. Because now that I've been doing this and stuff, I've been reconnecting with everything. And I'm like, okay, here I am in the moment. I'm home with my kids and I'm like, okay, why? They're asking a million things. And I just take a moment and I'm like, okay, what is going on with me? And I'm really connecting it with what state I'm in. With the constant auditory input, which is one of my like huge triggers. And so I think there is a big overlap. And yeah, I'm actually really interested to kind of dive into that a little bit more too.
Yeah, it's helped me a lot with Shalia because she can be very frustrating for me. And so it's helped me to be able to actually say out loud. And I say to her, Shalia, I'm kind of moving into raccoon right now. Or like she understands that language. And I'm getting a little restless and I'm getting frustrated because we have to be at the dentist for your dental cleaning at 2:30 and it's 2 o'clock and it's 15 minutes away and you're still in bed. I get to a lot of that with her, like, and I'm a timely person. I want to be on time. I'm responsible. It's very hard for me to be late. And she makes me late a lot. And I think just being able to say it out loud helps me to not blow.
Yeah.
It does.
Well,
There's something about just being able to say, I'm getting frustrated.
Well, and you're providing her with that language to associate feelings, bodily feelings with emotions, so that connection is great too. And then, letting my kids see that, man, mom's not always on. That's okay. Like, we don't have to be vengeful all the time. Like, there are moments where we're going to swing. And so I've appreciated that too, because I do have ADHD. So I have some difficulties with my executive functioning and regulation. And so it's nice to connect that too with my daughter, who is me, but 6. And so really she gets to see the adult part, and then she gets to take her own little pieces and make it what works for her.
Have you seen this one? Let's see. She's a community member, gets the newsletter, kids book about executive function. Have you seen that one? There's not a lot to it. It's very, like, there's just a few pages. Do you use it, Jess? Have you?
I haven't used it personally. I wanted to let this little year of EF work go with the teachers and stuff. And I know some of them have used that as well. So, yeah, I was going to kind of reconnect with them and see.
So the bidirectional link between your mind and your body, right? And so I felt like, okay, with the nervous system states and the ladder, we have, or the path, however we want to explain it, we have a way of organizing our nervous system states and understanding those. So I wanted to say, well, how can we organize our stories? And that's causal layered analysis, right? Where we look at, well, what is our story? And then who supports or limits me in this story? And what are my assumptions or beliefs? So I felt like with this one here, so like I did the formal one, the formal CLA for staff. This is the original one. And then Deb Dana used the term restoring in her book, one of her books. And I liked that. I thought that was such simpler language for kids. Like, well, let's restore that. Let's look at this a little bit differently. And then doing sort of an embodied, CLA around it, meaning, so as I'm telling my story, what state am I in? And then, so we go down and we unpack it. And then we move back up, in this part, we're moving back up. And how do we put that back together with a new hopeful metaphor? So for instance, when we talk about cognitive load and all the demands of the kids, so we're talking about how, it's so much for kids. So we came up, just the 5 of us, with a metaphor that could be a little bit better, like about cognitive load, right? We came up with, the myth is we're expecting too much about kids. There's nothing we can do about it. Like, that's like the hopeless feeling around all that. So a more hopeful would be to come up with a metaphor for what we're demanding of kids, and possibly has to do with lightening the cognitive load. Does that make sense? I don't know how to explain that well. So I would, like, if we were to unpack it and then we reorganize it with a more hopeful metaphor, which might be, just trying to think off the top of my head, like a metaphor for how we lighten cognitive load. Can you picture a metaphor for lightening cognitive load? One, I used a washing machine. I used, like, how when you put everything in a washing machine, you shove it all full and then it's not even and it goes boom, 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 right? Then you have to go in and you have to even it all out. So that could be a metaphor for cognitive load. It could be like, we're making these loads a little more even. We're using those 3 forms of cognition, right? We're using embodied and situated and distributed, spins nicely now. Instead of everybody's like, ah. So doesn't that feel a little bit better for your nervous system than the clunk, 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 right? So then if we did that and we worked up through that, it would be, well, how do my assumptions and beliefs support this evenly distributed cognitive load? How would my assumptions or beliefs would be, well, beliefs would be that extended mind science validates for us that we can lighten cognitive load for students. My assumption is that students can do better if we use these 3 forms with them. My assumption, my perception is that I can feel less stress about the amount I have to teach them because I have a little more resources to spread that load out. So whether it's writing an essay or whatever, how can we share that load and then that builds cooperation and safety, cues of safety. So then we move up and we say, well, how does who and what supports me now? So who and what would that be? That would be, the teacher will support me when they see I'm starting to get cognitive load, and my nervous system state also starting to go down the ladder. And my students in my class can support me. We can do co-regulating activities. And so now our news story is, yeah, we're expecting a lot and we move fast. But our news story is we have some more tools. We have some more resources. We haven't quite tapped into those 3 forms of cognition. If we tap into those instead of just using this, then possibly we can all feel less stress around it. You see how that works? So do you ever see using this ever with anybody? Curious.
I just think this tool could maybe help us review, like reframe it and find some ways to feel more hopeful and maybe get a plan for something going forward into this next year. So I'm excited to try this.
It's the preferred future activity. And that's one thing I feel the kids need to understand, that there's used futures. Those are the ones that aren't going to serve us. And then what can we do for our preferred future? What are the steps we can take right now? I think that could be really helpful. Rochelle.
I was just wondering, do you guys do any programs like in your classrooms? Okay, with the parents? Because you're talking about cognitive load coming into the classroom, like teaching them your resilience and going through. I was just wondering, do the schools implement that where they try to provide something to the parents so they're on board with you guys instead of you having them all walk in and changing the kids and not changing kind of where it originates? I'm not a teacher, so I'm just, because you guys, yeah, it's
Yeah. So
kind
at
of
my
like fighting a
school,
losing battle sometimes, right?
yeah, at my school, I think we're trying hard to figure that part out because we agree that that's key.
Right.
We have like every school, like a back to school night, and of course we encourage a relationship building between
Right.
everyone, all the staff and families at home. But yeah, we don't.
I don't know. Like I like listening and I was thinking, yeah, you guys are doing a great job, right? But to change the cognitive load before they walk in, even in the kindergartens and stuff, like it sort of has to start at home too to help you guys out because it's a lot, right, to take on. And they're all coming with different things and different backgrounds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was actually going to say all of this executive functioning stuff that we did at one of my schools. They had like an executive functioning night for all the parents to come, and then they were sending out monthly newsletters too to give them the information and the verbiage and stuff.
Right.
So it wasn't like the cognitive load idea, but like they were like we're
trying to get
idea,
everybody,
right?
right? Like it takes a
Yeah.
community to bring it all together, and you guys can only do your part. And like Leah was saying, she had a half hour and the kid just needed someone to sit there with her, which maybe should have been a family member that was with, like, right? It's hard because you guys are trying to take on so many roles, right? And yeah. Sorry, I was thinking that out loud and thinking all this work. I wonder if the schools implement anything that way.
So fun. I mean, just when we identified the 3 roadblocks to success, one of them was needing better support from parents. Like our community really, well, it's probably like I don't know,
All over.
COVID thing really polarized our community, and I feel like our parent group, I don't know, there's just kind of it's changed.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
People
I know
are
everybody.
people are really comfortable attacking
Yes.
school, attacking the teachers, blaming, instead of coming together as a team. Like, how can we grow through this and support people better?
Right. Right. Because it's no one person's fault. Yeah. The parents need the Resilient Learners backpack so they can see where they're at. Just right. And bring
It
it
all
in.
starts with us. I know it all starts with the adult in the room.
Yeah.
Like Deb Dane always says, one adult, there has to be at least one adult in the room in Ventral. Wherever you go, there's got to be at least one adult, you know?
And that's hard to find sometimes, really, truly, like it is, right? Because we're all cute and you better hope you can calm yourself nicely. Yeah.
Well, sometimes it's the kid in the room that's in Ventral. Like in book 1, I opened the book 1 with the story where I just had a horrible night. I was up with my kids that were sick. I was exhausted. I was out on the snow and the tarmac, and I was miserable and I was cold and I was just had it. And every kid who walked in, I yelled at and barked at and jumped on. And finally, one little girl in the back of the room said, "Miss Wilson, I think you need to do your dots and squeezies."
Yeah.
And sometimes that's You know, you
Perspective.
need, it's not sometimes the adult that's the one that's regulated. It's the
Yeah.
kid that's regulated. All right, well, I apologize for keeping us longer. I had no idea time was going so fast. I guess I was just enjoying it so much.
Me too.
No, it's
Any
awesome.
any final thoughts?
Yeah, well, Gina, if you know, kind of in the idea of like if you name it, you can tame it, to even just be able to say, yeah, there's a myth about the way our schools are functioning right now, and we're all just part of the storm. It does give a sense of, oh, we can name it. We can name the fact that somehow, I don't know who the creators of our educational system have decided more is better.
Yeah.
And
And then
Dr.
our
Terrell says with all the behavior we're seeing, he said we all just have to slow down.
Yeah.
Well, and just
He
even the
said that's the
information.
number one thing. Everything's just too fast. You just have to slow down.
Yeah, even you just said something, Deb.
I was
Wait,
just saying, oops, sorry. I was just gonna say too, like, what's the quality of, like, I find I have a lot of high school students who are having trouble with what they're reading, like the content of what they're having to read in class, and they find it disturbing. Like you were talking about being dysregulated. They're dysregulated because they don't even know how to cope or handle the content of what they're being taught to read, right? It's like too much for their maturity level, let alone along with the world and COVID and the way things have been going.
yeah.
That's
Yeah, I
where
don't know.
distributive cognition would be great.
Yep.
That's where
Yeah.
you split it all up and we all take these little
Yes.
parts and you draw it, you write it, you map it, you know, you bring it back to who you are in this world and how you relate to who that character is in that story.
Yeah.
That's a really important piece to that. That's where, you know, good teaching methodology. I
Yeah.
feel like we need to bring in that extended mind science is a big piece of just good teaching methodology that's I don't think's quite out there yet. She wrote the book, but it was so dense and so research based that I don't think it landed necessarily with educators. I nobody took the time. I took the time to read it because it was fascinating to me because it just, you know, we love anything that validates everything we've been doing for 25 years. I love her because she validates me. But aside from that, I just feel like there was just so much in that book. It was so rich. And so I tried to bring some of that into this because I think that's helps us be more resilient too, is instead of just going into dorsal and shutting down and this book is too hard and I don't get it and I
Yeah.
don't relate to it and it has nothing to do with me. That's a
Yes.
dorsal response. So, you know, how can we?
But you know, Deb, you have an expression that you've said today, like time for the information to land.
Mhm.
And I love that. That's so much better than do you get it?
Yeah.
Right? Like, do
Yeah.
you get it already
Yeah.
puts you on the defense,
Yes.
right? Like, has this information landed for you? It's like gentle and beautiful. And there's a variation in how much something's landed. And I just,
Mhm.
like, I think that's so, that in itself is so rich. Like, that can be an opening way of being able to communicate with students because to me, that's where the executive function piece is really hard is
Share it.
yeah, like when you're reading books, you have no idea why this matters, what's going on. You don't have any historical context. And then you're supposed to write an essay with 3 points related to something you have no foundation of at all.
Yep.
Good luck.
Do you know, I hated reading, even going into college. I hated reading. If you would have told me you're going to become a reading specialist, I would have said there's no way in hell I'm going to be a reading specialist because I hated it. Because every book, Scarlet Letter A and The Old Man and the Sea, and I was going to relate to any of these books. I hated reading those books. And then I found Anne of Green Gables. Somebody gave me that book. I don't read. Read this one. And it turned, her expression, every day is new with no mistakes. Like, that's my favorite expression in her book. And I just love that book, and I read her whole series. She has 6 or 7 of those books. So there's always hope for those non-readers, right? I was who we were talking about. I didn't relate to any of them. I didn't get the books. They just seemed heavy and boring, really boring. But I think if we could have distributed that a little bit and kind of brought something in that mattered, I think I could have maybe engaged a little bit more with it. But yeah, so I appreciate you all taking the time and staying on a little bit longer. And so we'll go into our step 3.
Good.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Have a good week.
Yeah, you too.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.